Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Theresa May's reshuffle continues then. She'll no doubt be hoping it goes a bit more smoothly than yesterday's pretty limited reshuffle. As Norma was saying, builds an opportunity to better reflect modern Britain. In the end, the only woman to be promoted was Esther McVey. She becomes Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Her appointment is likely to be controversial because of previous comments she's made as a minister in the same department serving in David Cameron's government. So who is she? Esther McVey started her career as a TV presenter.
We all have dreams, whether it be about success in our careers or improving our relationships with family and friends or sorting out our finances. Whatever success means to you, we're going to show you how you can change your dream into reality. Plenty of people have, so why shouldn't you?
But what I really want to know is, what does it feel like when you've achieved your goal?
Originally an American concept, business and sports people have been using personal development techniques for years. These professionals don't spend money on things they don't think are going to work. And now these same techniques are available to all of us.
She was first elected as a Conservative MP in 2010, but lost her seat in 2015. Whilst a minister in the Department for Work and Pensions, she defended the rise in figures of people using food banks.
More people are visiting, which you'd expect going to food banks, because as the time is tough, as time is tough, as we're all having to pay back this 1.5 trillion debt personally, which spiralled under Labour, as we're all trying to live within our means, change the gear, make sure we're paying back all our debt which happened under them.
Well, I asked Rob Halfon, Conservative MP, Chair of the Education Select Committee, for his reaction to Esther McVey's appointment, as well as the reshuffle more generally.
The choreography wasn't perfect yesterday, but there are good men and women in post. There's a great new party chairman and deputy chairman team. These are people, I've called it Essex men and women, running the senior parts of the Conservative Party, real white van conservatism, if you like. There are good people in the cabinet. Damien Hinds, the new education secretary, is a very compassionate Conservative. He believes in social justice. He cares deeply about the public sector. I think, I'm pleased actually that Jeremy Hunt is still in post, because the NHS is one of the toughest jobs in government. There are huge long-term problems there. I'm pleased that Sajid Javid is there. So yes, what counts at the end of the day is not the choreography, but have we got good men and women running the country.
But you must be disappointed that Justine Greening, then, the first comprehensively educated Education Secretary, has, rather than take another job, has resigned.
Well, I was apprentice minister until after the election, and I worked with Justine Green, and she cared deeply about apprenticeships and skills. But Damien Green also went to State School, also comes from a working class background.
Damien Hinds.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, Damien Hinds. He is very compassionate. As I say, he cares deeply about the public sector. I've known him for a long time. He's quite a wise man. So I think whatever the reasons that Justine Greening has gone, and that's way beyond my pay grade, at least there is a very good replacement in the shape of Damien Hinds.
And I want to ask you finally, if I may, Mr Halfon, about the new Work and Pensions Secretary. It's Esther McVey. She's a former Disabilities Minister under David Cameron's government. She was, as you know, severely criticised by many people with disabilities, many charities that represent people with disabilities, for her implementation of personal independence payments and trying to get many people off the previous disability living allowance.
Well, the important thing is that when she was Disabilities Minister, we were spending roughly 50 billion a year on disability benefits. That's amongst the highest in the developed world, possibly the most highest amount of money. That money has continued, and I think that the government have learnt a lot from the what happened with the PIP and the employment support allowance issues. And from what I understand, there's going to be no more cuts or changes to disability benefits, and I wish her well in that post.
Is she a compassionate Conservative?
I believe she's a compassionate Conservative. She's also from a working class background from the north of England. and I think she will do the best that she possibly can for the country.
Rob Halfon. Well, as Minister in charge of disabilities, Esther McVey oversaw the introduction of personal independence payments, which replaced disability living allowance, and the closure of remploy plants for disabled workers. Labour's Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell was widely criticised for calling her a stain on humanity during a Commons debate. Esther McVey lost her seat not long after those comments were made in the 2015 general election, but returned to Parliament in former Chancellor George Osborne's old seat of Tatton last year. Esther McVey, who's previously admitted she'd like to be Prime Minister, is seen by colleagues as quick-witted and more human than some other MPs. She's previously been involved in a campaign, #NotJustForBoys, aimed at helping women to succeed in male-dominated sectors. Let's talk now to Labour MP Barry Shearman, who was criticised in 2015 for calling Esther McVey a hard-hearted Hannah during a debate in the Commons. Former Pensions Minister and Director of Policy at... I'm sorry, I can't read that. He's called Sir Steve Webb. Sir Steve Webb is with us. He worked with Esther McVey in the coalition government. And Simon Green. He has a neurological condition which affects his legs and has used a wheelchair since 2003. Simon is also a campaigner for the charity Disability Wales. Welcome, all of you. I think, Barry Shearman, you repeated your comment, hard-hearted Hannah, or alluded to it anyway, yesterday. Why?
Well, it summed her up. She was, the number 2 to Ian Duncan Smith, and we all knew in the House, and of course I had Robert Halfon's role in those days. I was chair of the Education Committee. And she was someone who looked at the welfare state as he seemed to have a view that it was all about scroungers, and her job was to, deliver that hard message. And, she revelled in that role of being the hard person on the front bench.
How do you know she revelled in it?
Because I was in every question time where she absolutely glowed when she seemed she was really delivering the hard message, that, the people that out there, most of whom she thought were scroungers were going to have the hard message and their benefits were going to be taken away from them. And nothing can sum up yesterday that we lose Justine Greening, one of the most humane ministers, most liberal ministers in the government, and replaced by this woman who has this reputation for being a hard-hearted Hannah, and she's now going to be in charge of universal credit that is impacting on so many people's lives up and down the country.
Sir Steve Webb, former Pensions Minister, Director of Policy of Royal London now. How did you find working alongside Esther McVey?
On a personal level, I just don't recognise that description that you've just heard. I've never heard the word scrounger in public or in private pass her lips, and I don't think Barry Shearman has either. If he has, be interested to know when he's ever heard us say it. Of course, this was a time when the coalition government, of which I was a member, was trying to find savings, and that was a difficult time, and fronting that up when the opposition are going for you is difficult. And I think Esther McVey was someone who, I think, particularly as a woman in politics, in very brutal politics, was picked on. I think some much worse things than you just quoted that I probably can't repeat on the BBC were said against her. She was personally vilified, and although I'm not involved in politics anymore, it's not my job to defend the last government. I think that actually she's a humane person, and that's the sort of person you want involved, especially in these sorts of issues.
Simon Green, as a disability campaigner, it was one of her responsibilities to oversee the introduction of PIP, personal independence payments, which took over from disability living allowance. She wasn't in charge of that department then, it was Ian Duncan Smith. But how would you regard her and her promotion now to Work and Pensions Secretary?
Well, when I saw on social media that the role she got as Works and Pensions Secretary, I thought it was a joke. She is one of the most disliked politicians in the disabled community. I think she's completely clueless about how disabled people live and what. The policies that the Conservative Party have brought in over the last few years have destroyed the lives of many disabled people. Disabled people already have. Norman Tebbit said in an interview once on Newsnight that when you're disabled, everything takes longer and everything costs more, when he was talking about the impact that the injury in the IRA bomb had on his wife. Yet they continue to remove DLA, or now PIP, off thousands and thousands of disabled people. And Esther McVey made the comment that 3 times as many people are on DLA PIP now as they were when it was first introduced. through the wonders of modern science and medicine, more disabled people are surviving injuries. More disabled people are being born who would have died maybe 10, 20 years ago, are now surviving. So we are going to have more disabled people living. So more people are going to need to claim PIP and DLA. And I've seen the really real impact that all these reforms have had. The people who've had PIP removed off them, who've had to give up their cars and lost their jobs. People who've been suicidal.
Do you accept, Simon Green, as a disability campaigner, that one of the impacts of personal independence payments has been that more people have moved into work and remained in work?
I don't know where the Conservatives get that from. I disagree with that. The disabled people I speak to, ones who have jobs, are in jobs that they don't feel they can do. They've been forced into those jobs, and they struggle on a daily basis when in that working environment. And I think a lot of the time, I don't think people are in jobs. A lot of people have been moved from JSA to ESA and back and forth, and they're doing voluntary jobs. Who's working in the charity shop in the town centre. They're not being paid for that work, but according to the statistics that Tories have, they will class her as working. I've known lots of disabled people who've lost their jobs under the government, and the amount of money that has been wasted on the appeals by far outstrips the amount of money that has been saved by taking all these people off the benefits. The fact that they've employed now Esther McVey, who's made lots of disgust. The gentleman who spoke before said that people have some of the things said against her, I think, have been wrong and been too personal. But what about the tens of thousands of disabled people who've been picked on by her, by Ian Duncan Smith, and the rest of this clueless Tory government who don't really know how a real person is? And I don't really think they care about the disabled community. And I'm disgusted that she's been that she's been given this position, and I hope she doesn't last long, because I don't think there's a single disabled person in this country that would say that she's a good choice for this job.
We did ask for some Conservative MPs to come on the programme as well as part of this discussion. So Steve Webb is a former pensions minister, former member of the coalition government. What would you say to Simon Green?
I think one of the things to remember is the drive that the Treasury has in all of this. It doesn't matter what minister you are in what department. If the Treasury is cutting the budget, you basically have a choice. You can simply resign, say no, walk away, or you can try and work within to try and modify the impact of some of the changes. And I think that's what Esther McVey did. So in other words, yes, of course, she could have resigned. Anyone could resign if you felt that was actually going to stop things happening. Or you can be within the system, try and reform it, try and moderate it. And, you know, you mentioned the very positive work she'd done on young women, trying to give them young, positive role models. And I think the caricature, you know, it's up to Esther McVey to defend herself and what she said. But my experience of her is somebody who listens and who is actually, you know, I think a good person in that role. My big concern is really that we keep changing these ministers all the time. David Gauke, her predecessor, was only there for 7 months. DWP is a huge, complicated department, spends £200 billion, responsible for pensions, disability benefits, employment, and so on. And it actually having someone who's been in the department before will at least help to get her up to speed.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. So Steve Webb, former pensions minister, former member of the coalition government under the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. Barry Shearman, Labour MP, thank you. And Simon Green, thank you. He's a disability campaigner.